Hey everyone, Tactics here, nearing the end of my advanced route walkthrough series for the War Within Season 1, where in this video we're going to be going over my title route for the Necrotic Wake, including some fancy priest mind control tech in the back half of the dungeon. Of course, that does mean that this route is not exactly what I would call pug friendly, and instead is targeted at coordinated groups, specifically pushing for that 0.1% title. And for those groups or anyone else interested, I will link the MDT string down in the description below. Now let's hop right into the key here. To start, we're doing a big pull with these all mobs all the way up to this first gatekeeper here. So you got a bunch of soldiers, this pack, the gatekeeper, and then a couple of the patrols coming in. You will notice this harvester on the side is mind soothed. We are going to be picking up this shield, and we're going to use that on the first gatekeeper AoE here to help with the defensiveness. Of course, Lust is going to be running, CDs are going to be running, so stuff's going to die pretty fast, and we're going to kill this gatekeeper before the first act, or the second AoE rather. So coming up here, grouping up the pack here, we have a kick rotation on the harvester, and then I'm going to be throwing my spare kicks into the gatekeeper, getting these patrolling blight bags. These blight bags do actually detonate for quite a significant amount of damage, which is why we don't add these extra blight bags over here. We're just adding the one pack of blight bags, and we're going to get these 3 soldiers as well. Also keep in mind, this portal will spawn more soldiers as well. So here they come. So make sure tanks are on top of that, getting aggro. DPS, don't be standing right next to the portal. And you can see we have that blue circle on the ground. That is what the Kyrian shield is. Stand in that circle, you get your DR. And then the gatekeeper is now basically dead, right? We've popped all their CDs. Bloodlust here to get this stuff down is a pretty big pull. At this point, it's basically all tank damage outside of the kick. You need to be very careful. If you have a soothe, soothing his vanguard is fine. We don't really use that here, but it's something you can do if that mob is staying alive for longer than needed. And now we're going to break off. So you're going to see here, I'm going to rewind again. Our healer is going to go over here. He's going to fade his way over and pick up the spear. If you don't have a priest, you don't need to do this now. You can do this after the boss, because we're not going to use that spear for a while. But this saves us like 10 seconds after the boss. So the priest goes and gets that spear. I'm going to move up. I'm going to grab this shield as the second shield. And what we're going to do now is we're going to use this flesh crafter, who's an axe thrower, to kill this gatekeeper for us, essentially, and kill this gatekeeper in the same amount of time that we killed the last one. And so what we're going to do then is we're going to CC that corpse harvester, because that mob doesn't really move well, and we don't want additional targets to get hit by the axe. And we're going to have these mobs pulled in. And you're going to see here, basically, we line them up. Axe thrower goes in, boom. Big chunk of damage to the mob. We're all hitting this guy. And the goal is to kill this gatekeeper again before the second Wrath of Zul'Ramis, if possible. And then we're going to chain this, as well as a patrol of Patrick soldiers, back onto the guy that we see up top. And that just, it makes our life a lot easier. So boom, second axe hits the guy. It's done. Grab the 2 soldiers. And now we do the rest of the pull up here. Just a nice little neat pull, which gives you a ton of count from that gatekeeper, while not being super difficult. And in terms of how we survive that, we of course have the shield, like I mentioned. I don't use it here because we're going to save this for a pull later on. We use Zephyr, I believe, on this Wrath of Zul'Ramis. And also potentially, if you did get a second one, if like an axe missed or something, you could use another defensive, like for us, Disc Barrier. And so now this is really neat because it now lines up our 2-minute CDs with the boss pull. So now we're going to pull an entire trash pack onto the first boss here. After this pack dies, we're going to do this pack right in front of the boss. And combined with this pack is another axe thrower. So we're going to try our best to get, that axe thrower to hit good targets. This one, it's not the end of the world. Like, I actually think that hit the boss there. So, whenever you can hit the boss, great. Otherwise, it's going to hit something. All the worms are going behind the boss here. We're basically going to go in a giant circle down to the entrance of the dungeon, and then loop back around. And by the time we loop back, all this will be despawned. So you can kind of do this infinitely if you do it correctly. And we're just going to be slowly kiting backwards here. Kiting backwards. Be very, very careful. Tanks. There are 2 vanguards in this pack. So whenever their tank debuffs overlap with the actual boss's tank debuff, it does hurt a lot. You can also see the corpse harvester is kind of falling behind a little bit. We're kind of using sleepwalk and ranging it as best as we can to kind of get it in. If this is also ever a problem, your priest could just mind control him here. It's kind of close enough. I think it's going to get cleaved down pretty quickly at this point. And it's just going to kind of die with these next worms. So it's not the end of the world. But if it was like super healthy for some reason, didn't get cleaved a lot, you could just use Nox if you're able to hit a good angle, or a priest mind soothe, or DK death grip, or something like that to get that mob in. And you were just basically slowly kiting. A little tech. If you're running the disease and poison immunity on Blessing of Sacrifice as a paladin. It is basically immunes this frontal. So you can see I'm gonna sack our priest here, and he takes 0 damage and doesn't get the debuff. So it actually is literally just an immune that you can do every other time. So very, very powerful. We basically, I think we do that on anyone who's not the rogue, is what I believe is our strategies, because the rogue always has an answer to it. And that's the big thing, defensives on this boss. You need to have a defensive running if you are the one targeted by Heaving Wretch. So you need to make sure, people have a button available, and that's why sack is always the priority. So again, I will kind of call, hey, I don't have sack this time, so he's going to use, he throws a barrier down on the ground because he didn't have something, and now I'm going to be like, hey, I have sack available, and basically if the target is not the rogue, I will sack them. If the target is the rogue, he does his own thing unless he specifically calls that he needs a sack, and that way, if I call that I don't have a sack, now people can start using other defensives. And you see here, we've been adding blight bags in. There's a blight bag pack to the left that we added in when we passed by that. We cleave them down. When we come down here, we'll add this blight bag pack, and it's just extra little bit of funnel onto the boss. It's not super dangerous, especially in really it's the worms that we're scared of, right? And you can see these bites kind of start to cast. These bites are very scary. If you get bit by one of these guys, you are likely dying once you get to like 14 plus key level. So be very, very careful. And you can see now too, like we're down in this area, and the stuff is already kind of despawning. At this point, we probably could have fully ignored these worms actually, and you can use things like the evoker root and that kind of thing, or like knock things away, Ursul's things away, if you had that available to you. But you can see like we had more room here now to actually loop back around if we wanted. Oh, I think our priest was testing mind controlling these worms too, so we now have to just randomly kill a worm because it stayed throughout the end of the fight. So there's that. And now this is the time where if you didn't have a priest, take the spear with Fade. You could go grab that spear. And now we're going to do a big spicy pull. So you don't need a rogue to do this, first off. Literally, I think just priest evoker is enough. Priest can mind soothe these guys, and then the evoker can sleepwalk the close one, and then you can just walk right this way and get around. We obviously have a rogue, so we're just going to shroud. I'm going to grab this orb here, and we're going to go all the way into Narzuda. So this is a big pull, and you can see we made sure we had cooldowns available for this pull. This grouping goes a little bit weird. I think we missed one of our kicks potentially on this guy. So you can see Star is just kind of AFK out there. So what's going to happen is I believe our priest is going to mind control. That's like a common thing. Mind control can save you in a lot of these pulls if things go wrong, and you can just worry about that mob later. But basically what's going to happen here is we go in and your tank is in a lot of danger, right? Because there's a bunch of Necrotic Bolt mobs. There's a Skeletal Marauder, which also has a frontal ability. And then there's the Bone Carver here, which puts the stacking health reduction on the tank. There's only one of them, luckily, so it's not going to stack up. But it's still pretty nasty reduction, which is considered a bleed. So you can't use bleed cleanses to remove it. So in terms of how we group up here, you see I throw a shield into one of the casters. We have an assigned kick out there. And then we have our shaman, I believe, assigned to kick every single fear. And so all the other kicks are kind of used on the grouping here. I think our rogue also uses Garrote Silence on a few of these mobs out here. I think he actually missed. That's probably what happened. He missed the Garrote Silence on this mob, it looks like, potentially. And that's why it didn't come in. And so now I'm going to toll to get in initially to get some initial kicks, initial threat. Our evoker's going over to get that orb over there. And basically what's going to happen is we're going to invest things like kicks. I'm going to invest defensives. And then I'm going to call for the evoker to use his necrotic orb, or his orb in a second here. So I bubbled here, and then he's going to go into his orb in a second, right out of that bubble. Boom, his orb is running. You can see in the top left. So he's now chain interrupting. This is where it becomes slightly problematic, and this is where this pull is very dangerous, right? Because there is a frontal guy in this pull, the Marauder, and you then have a ton of area denial from Narzuda. So Narzuda and these things on the ground, the wells. So Narzuda is going to do this AoE. I'm going to try and turn as little as I can. But you see, I don't really have a ton of options here. And because the only dodge option puts these guys within 180 degrees of the frontal man, it's just unfortunate timing. The frontal kind of goes off over there. So, I mean, to avoid this, I could have tried to do bubble after the Anima Orb as an example. That's a potential. You could try and use Anima Orb and then do your bubble out of the first Anima Orb. That is a potential I could have adjusted there. Otherwise, I could have potentially used Steed and run backwards here. I think that's a little risky. The other thing is I probably should have gone deeper down this way towards the staircase and then looped around. and that would have given me a little bit more space to potentially avoid. So there's a couple things you can do. Generally, though, you can see like melee need to be very, very careful of where this Marauder is facing, and especially if the frontal overlaps with the burst, you need to be making sure that you are at the back of the boss, like the far back of that mob, rather. Sorry. And that's how you would avoid that death. And now basically, I would chain my orb into after his orb is done and the defensive running is done, which I think we actually kind of don't need. We kind of kill this pack relatively quickly, a little bit quicker than we intended. Oh, and there's also that other sorcerer that's kind of running around doing weird stuff. And so I will pop the orb eventually, surely. Maybe I don't, actually. Maybe I end up holding this orb for a little bit, which is possible. No, I did spend it. But basically, that's the pull. And again, it lasts a little bit longer because we had to mind control that sorcerer because we lost the DPS. But that's kind of the gist of the pull, right? The setup and making sure you are interrupting things is important. I also have the shield that I didn't need to use there. That's another defensive. But again, that's going to be beneath your silence as the tank. So something to keep in mind. Also, there's the second shield there if you really need it. So you have a lot of defensive options as a tank there to keep you alive that we didn't use on this one. So something to keep in mind. Now we're moving forward here. A couple Marauders, one kick of the melee variety assigned to each, so our rogue and our shaman. And then I'm going to pull in this necromancer, being careful not to Avenger shield it because we do want to CC this mage to eliminate those kicks entirely. And then I'm going to be kicking the necromancer here. You still need to use a CC on the necromancer when he does his spawn ability. She just didn't do it. Animate dead here. Use a CC quickly. Watch the swirlies on the ground. Make sure you pick up any you spawn. We had 2 spawn here. I could have been a little faster and gotten 1, but not the end of the world, really. And we're just basically, I think the rogue is hitting his marauder and the shaman's hitting his marauder, I think is what's going on here, to try and get them killed relatively evenly, making sure you are killing the bone shield. That's a big thing because it doesn't instantly kill the mobs anymore, but it does deal a big chunk. And that's why blue is so far ahead here in terms of health, because we missed one of those shields. Then we're going to get the spear in the corner with the evoker. We're going to mount up. There's a couple things you could do here. If your rogue's running 3-minute shroud, he could shroud here. If you don't have that, you see our priest is going through. Priest could life grip a 3-seater mount. We can also rescue a 3-seater mount. So either works. Evoker rescues us across. Priest gets that shield over there, I believe. Yeah. And we're going for another big pull here. This would traditionally be the Bloodlust pull. We're moving a little fast here, like I mentioned, so we don't have Bloodlust up, so we're going to lust later. But this would be your Bloodlust pull, and then again, it lines up with like our 2 minutes and stuff like that. So we're getting all these corpses here, getting an Avenger shield on that guy, and that guy's going to get kicked in, and then I'm going to Divine Toll over here on this pack. And so that means there's 2 Marauders. And again, melee kicks are on the Marauders. You've got one on the yellow and one on blue. The Evoker is going to kick green to make sure green gets in to the pack here. And then everyone, specifically the healer, but everyone really needs to be careful of those corpses because I don't have great threat. You saw I literally almost didn't touch those corpses at all. So you need to be very careful of that. And again, double frontal, make sure they're pointed away from your group. And this is also where if you potentially see here, there's an orb here. The Evoker is going to go get that orb. The Evoker goes and grabs that orb, and this is another situation like the Narzuda pull where I'm going to be using defensives. We're going to be using, interrupts, mostly my interrupts, because it's only really me and the Evoker kicking the bolt mobs. And then out of that, I'm going to call for the Evoker to use his orb, and then I'm going to do defense on the backside. So again, the question is like, do I bubble here or do it? He orbs first. There we go. And then I'm going to bubble out of his orb most likely here. His orb ends now. Still a bunch of mobs alive. I bubble there. And that kind of overlaps with the bleed. There is that stacking bleed health reduction guy in this pack, so something to be aware of as well. And pack is dead. And now we're going to do the mini boss with the 2 remaining bone carvers that we did skip on the side there. So we're going to grab them and pull them into this guy here. Also note that we did skip a couple guys during the Evoker skip. I'll just rewind real quick here. We did mind suit these guys to not pull them because they're kind of too far away. And of course, we did skirt around the Necromancer here. So you want to skip those 2 sets of mobs. Mini boss and 2 bone carvers here. Not a lot to talk about. If you do get hit by both of these, what you can do is obviously you can dwarf or you can bleed cleanse if you can from the Evoker, or again, bubble. Either works. I think I dwarf that one. If I get hit again, I might call for a bleed cleanse or something like that. But generally, just with the pack being this small, you're not really super in danger. And now we're going into the boss, and we're going to be lusting on our 2 minutes here. And I do actually think I don't think we did it here. I'm going to be taking the spear, by the way. This is my spear. I think it's probably good to send a spear here with your CDs, especially if you get here at a point where you can't lust that big pull we just did, like we couldn't. And so you're going to lust this boss instead, because it's really the only other lust, especially if you're lusting this boss. But I think in general, even with 2 minutes, it's probably a very, very good idea to spear this guy, because you're not really going to get too many other good spears. Potentially, if you're 2-phasing on the verge of 3-phasing the second boss, you could use 2 spears on that boss, one in the first phase, one in the second. And that's probably a good thing as soon as you get to like 16-ish key level. But if you're getting here with Bloodlust on like a 14, I think you just spear this with your CDs. We are also going to pull this boss all the way down. Also, yes, before anyone yells at me, Rogue didn't get to re-stealth. The Rogue did get to re-stealth. They were yelling at me to chain pull the boss. The Rogue like melded. Yeah, there, right there. Okay. I don't want to hear it, Rogues, in the comments. I let them re-stealth before the boss. I don't want to hear it, but Rogues, man, unbelievable. Okay, anyways, we're pulling the boss. We're pulling the boss. And so you do see we pull to the edge of the room here. This basically does, it cuts off like 180 degrees of spawn points for the ads. So it makes grouping them a little bit easier, because basically you can't spawn anything on this wall. And so it spawns the ads all in kind of this you know, a 180 arc instead of a 360 arc, which is nice. As a paladin, you kind of own these ads. You basically, what you can do is you can see I'm running Moment of Glory in this dungeon, and so you can alternate Divine Toll and Moment of Glory on spawns of these ads to basically solo kicks on the caster ads, both caster ads in any given phase, or any given spawn rather, and then you just have melees. We have all 3 of our other interrupts on a rotation on Amarth. So I basically am soloing the kicks on these other ads. You can see, right, I throw the kick out, I pop Moment of Glory, and now I just have a billion shields, and I have my own kick as well. Things are grouped up. I'm kicking literally everything, and as a backup, I have Hodge, and we always group up on top of the crossbowman, because that's the one not stationary mob. Obviously, if you have a DK, this is also a little bit easier. They can A-bomb slim every other set as well, I believe. So that is pretty useful as well. And they also have regular death grip, which they can move around with someone like the crossbowman. So we don't have a DK, so we're instead moving on top of the crossbowman. But generally, you know, pretty. And then Divine Tools back up. So it's like you have a lot of interrupts here as a paladin to kind of solo that stuff. And then we're moving upstairs. We are going to sit here for about 10 seconds, I think, just to let the pats line up, because basically what we're going to do is we're going to get this pack into this pack, as well as these spare parts in the side here. And that's going to be our first big pull with all our CDs. So grabbing them, we have 2 corpse collectors. Alternatively, you can CC a corpse collector in this pack and only do 1 and do a second corpse collector in the next pull. That's something I've seen I think is very safe, because it eliminates the double throw flesh shenanigans, which can happen. And that's like an easy way to get one shot basically throughout this dungeon. If you're pulling mobs that cast throw flesh and there's 2 of them, when they sync up their throw fleshes on these high key levels, they can one-shot people. So you need to be very careful with that. Big pull here, again, grouping everything up. And I think I actually misplayed this pull a little bit. Yeah, I think I'm a bit greedy with my bubble taunt. So basically what I should have done is watching this debuff, right? Because this debuff is an amp on you. I should have bubbled after the second application here, basically. And that would have made me immune. And I died to this mutilate, because it's a double stacked mutilate. That I wasn't ready for, basically. So I was a bit greedy there with my defensives. Just should have bubbled that, and that would have been fine. I think we just chain die here for a second. Yeah. Just make sure, basically, whenever you hit 2 stacks, that's when you're really in the most danger as a tank. And if you are a paladin, obviously that's when you would press your bubble and reset your stacks. That would buy you a lot of time. If you're not a paladin, you need to be very vigilant on the next tank buster from then on. And you really want that mob to die. I mean, that mob almost died before that mutilate. So again, I was just being a little greedy with my defensives, which I shouldn't have been. But you know, it is what it is. And we're getting our kicks here again on Corpse Collector, where I'm soloing 1 and then 2 melee kicks on the other. And now this is where the tech starts. This is our Flesh Crafter buddy, and he's going to be with us for the rest of the dungeon. And so we're going to alternate between keeping him mind controlled, keeping him rooted. There's Shaman Root Totem, and the Evoker Root is how the main roots. Also keeping him CC'd. Our Shaman has Hex, our Evoker has Sleepwalk, and of course our Priest has mind control. And then our Rogue actually has single target blind in this dungeon. And I have debated taking Repentance. I haven't bit the bullet on taking Repentance yet. I'm still playing Blinding Light, but technically an option. We're going to pull this guy over. We're going to let this first axe go in and hit this creation, pull this pack over here, and then we're going to CC him with Hex over there. So now he's going to be AFK for a little bit. We're killing this pack, pretty straightforward. And again, this would, I think, having 2 corpse collectors here because you CC'd a corpse collector in the previous bowl and added into this one, not a bad idea. And now we're going into the corner here, where again we can start to use this axe guy a little bit. So we're going to go into the pack here, and I think everyone but the dragon is going to get relatively close here. The dragon's going to go break the CC. It's kind of, he's babysitting it. So he breaks it. It targets him. So he is here. He hits the axe on the stitch work. You can see everything is behind the mob. And then our shaman goes out to hex the mob because the evoker was targeted. If the evoker wasn't targeted, he could re-sleepwalk it or he could root it even. But because he was targeted, the shaman just kind of alternated with him. Don't be in the path of the axe here, right? That's very, very dangerous. You can get one shot. And really, you don't need to use it a ton in this area. It's kind of like a little extra thing to really use it. If you're scared to use it on any of these polls, really the importance of this mob is on the final boss. So you can just CC this mob and keep him perma CC'd. And that's totally fine. That is totally fine to do that. At this point, the mob needs to be CC'd. I think so. You have to wait for the boss to actually start RPing. He didn't RP yet after we mind controlled it. And so because of that, we have to wait for mind control CD and mind control again. But this means this is the part of the tech that can only be done with a priest in the group. No other thing works as a humanoid, so control undead doesn't work. The priest needs to specifically mind control this guy so that you can progress the dungeon. Because otherwise, you have to kill this mob in order to spawn the mini bosses. Mind control goes out. Boss starts RPing. Mini bosses now spawn. Now we're free. We don't need to do that anymore. We can just keep this guy CC'd. And generally, I do say you should CC him during this because these guys both do their axes anyways. And it just makes it a little bit spooky to kind of have a third axe in play. I also think I throw out a bop here on this first fixate. Yeah, bop. He can just stand still and we can keep cleaving. Then we can do our next axis. So this pack dies super quick. And now is when we could start using this flesh crafter because again, the big golem guys are kind of the ones that die way slower than their other pack mates, I guess. And so again, kind of try and group the pack separate from the guy, and he comes in. Boom. Actually, I think the mob got CC'd at the end there. What happened? Mob CC'd, but we're gonna basically, I believe, try and use this next axe coming out here. Is he gonna break the blind or something like that? But we're kind of in a position to use it. There it is. Boom. It's the mob. Watch this frontal. That's something to be aware of. That frontal is a little spooky if it overlaps with when you're hitting the axe. So it's something to be aware of there. But again, I mean, at this point, like the guy's kind of low. We're not super worried. I bubble to remove my stacks here. This is a much easier to see when you're in danger here. So that's why I used it at 3 stacks instead of 2. But again, you could use it at 2 stacks as well. One more axe. There we go. And kill the guy. And we're moving into the final trash pack here. And again, basically this mob is just getting babysat by the evoker. And if the evoker ever needs help, he calls for either a hex or a fear or a blind or something like that to help him out. Rot spew is very dangerous. You need to be careful of this spew disease. Make sure if you are pressing a personal, especially if you're at low health, especially if you're in melee, right? Because there's rot damage. This owns. Boom, it goes out. That's through a defensive, certainly. And again, we're just trying to keep the leftovers on the side opposite the axe throw. We already hit 1 axe on this boss, which is nice. But you can see it basically, I think our shaman gets bullied here. And just be careful. I think we just missed calling for a defensive or something like that. But basically, he got picked 3 times in a row here, and he just kind of rotted out because he ran out of defensives. I had sack available, so I probably should have sacked him, but I don't think I knew he ran out of stuff. So just something to be aware of. This does hurt quite a bit. Like there's the hit. With some minor defenses up, I believe. So as this key level goes up, basically this will one-shot you without a defensive. Now we have the boss here. And like I said, this is either going to be a 1 spear commit or a 2 spear commit, depending on key level. I think at this key level, you do 1. 15 is probably arguable. I think 16 and above, you probably want to do a double spear on this boss. Back to back, not stacking. Remember, they don't stack anymore. But we're just seeing this flesh crafter. Some people, again, on the highest key levels will use this flesh crafter. I think it's unnecessary all the way up to like 17s and stuff. So I would just keep this guy CC'd and not worry about it. We're off to the side. We're doing the first hook in here. And then we're lusting with the Evoker's Spear. Evoker's Spear is going into the boss, lusting all CDs. Also, if you need to wait on pull for your CDs to be available, do that. Do not pull this boss until your CDs are like less than 20 seconds away, 15 seconds away, so you can actually CD as soon as this boss is down with Bloodlust. And then, yeah, facing this meat hook into the boss here. How this timing works is this first one basically instantly gets interrupted, but then in the next phase, the person being fixated needs to kite slightly or be bopped. Again, either works, but they need to do one of those things just to keep the boss in the path of the axe. Otherwise, if you're like off to the side and the abomination is just throw, there is like a second or two gap on the second phase where this Surgeon Stitchflesh can get out of range of the line attack, so you need to be careful. But we kind of own this boss. You want to try and ideally not kill this creation. Second one always goes to the platform again, and you can see we barely don't kill it. On a higher key level, you would probably, this would die in the second spear. Your second spear would hit that guy and the boss again, and then you would kill the boss here, and that other creation would die relatively quickly as well here. And again, this one, so you can see here, we kite in the line. That's what I'm talking about. If we had kite perpendicular to the line, the boss would have dodged it, so be careful. There we go. Now we're going up. So we mind control this guy, and he's going to come up with us. So we all go upstairs. He's mind controlled. He's going to snap up to the top with us. He's also our count, by the way. That's why we're not at 100% count. There he is. We're going to release the mind control, and basically how our plan with this is we're going to CC him there, and our evoker basically bounces him back and forth along this side of the room, and then we play on the other like 60% of the room. Like, this is our area. This is actually where we drop puddles on this side, and this is kind of where the evoker plays. So we're going to pull the boss, drag him to this side of the room. Again, do it on pull, because outside of pull, this boss is very finicky with movement. So position your boss ASAP immediately, basically, to get him in a good spot. And then you'll be good. And basically what we're trying to do here is the evoker is going to go break this guy to line up with the Aegises, essentially, because we want the axe to specifically hit the boss when an Aegis is up, to instantly break it is the goal. So that he's walking over there to break it because Aegis is soon. And again, he's babysitting it. If he needs help, he calls. We have Hex, we have Fears, we have the Rogue Blind, depending on who's available on the platform, so people can't help. And also his root, that's the other thing. If he gets targeted, a smart thing to do is root this mob instantly and then dash over here. That's something that can be done. The other thing, Frozen Binds. You can see I actually pre-freedomed, and it immunes the effect, so you can pre-freedom the target here, and they don't get hit. You can do that technically every time. It gets tight if you're a little slow, so be careful. And then otherwise, we're just kind of it's going to be a rinse and repeat, all about control here. So again, it goes right in, because every DPS is up on this first one, the shield is unnecessary, but he wants to keep the timing with the shields, right? So you can see if he does it for the first shield, even though it doesn't hit anything, it'll be ready for the next shield, which is good. Our DPS goes away. And also, by the way, if there's no DPS down already, I believe the evoker is not an eligible target. So that's why you can consistently put the evoker here. Something to be aware of is if your second person is a little slow, all of a sudden your evoker becomes an eligible target with the other DPSers. So you're kind of 50-50ing it there. So what some people have done is this evoker holds their second breath. The second breath, which again on pull, by the way, we sent Spear on pull with CDs. Or we didn't have CDs, so we just sent Spear on pull. With 1 minute. The evoker breath may need to hold their second breath. Because if they get picked down, really the only way for them to survive down there and get back quickly is to commit like everything they have to kill that ad, including a single target breath on it. So something to keep in mind. And if that does happen, all of a sudden it becomes the shaman's job to babysit this guy a little bit, just to make sure he doesn't run rampant. And again, freedoming the bind, keep an eye on that. There's the axe. And this is really important because that shield does an insane amount of damage while it's up. And because we basically are down like a DPS and a half, right? Because we have an evoker up here and our DPS is down. So it's very hard for us to break this shield before we get overwhelmed, which is why this Fleshcrafter is so important. It allows us to commit damage to the boss himself, or sometimes to the ad downstairs to get back quickly. Well, this Fleshcrafter is doing all the work, not only dealing damage to the boss, but also breaking the shield relatively quickly. So again, he's going to break. Boom, shield pops. The cleaver is going to hit. Like, we're going to get 2 ticks of the shield. One tick. Palm Storm goes out, and again, we are rotating around the boss. We have just a rule to go right around the boss. If you're around the boss, range can do whatever the heck they want. The ice gets dropped on this side of the room, and just, again, rinse and repeat. Evoker's playing over here. And the other thing we kind of figured out is, like, if something messes up and this guy gets in, it's kind of fine as long as you've gotten the first couple axes out. And again, at that point, you'll just use like CCs, like stuns and disorients to kind of manage, hey, this is a terrible time for the axe to go off. Use one of those CCs to slow it down, to give you time to move in the circle, for example, to delay it to last, to hit a shield, for example, one of those things. But as long as the boss is like 60% HP, it's kind of not the end of the world. He comes in here at 20%, so relatively low. But if the boss is like 60%ish, you can kind of work with it. So don't panic. And you can see, like, here, right, it's going to hit the boss, boom. But if it was weird, we could have used a stun, we could have used a disorient or something like that. This is going to be a dangerous shield now, which we called for, so our priest was able to prepare a little bit for it. And again, here, perfect example, I stunned this mob because it's like a really awkward timing, right? It's happening kind of during the swirlies here because we've lost control of the mob, so I just stun him, and then we're able to do it after the actual, I mean, we sleepwalk it again and stop that, and we're able to do it after everything's kind of recovered a little bit. But that is it, guys. That is Necrotic Wake. Lots of tech in this dungeon that can allow you to do pretty high keys with a certain specific comp, obviously. So, you know, not every comp's going to be able to do this, but that's kind of what we do when pushing these higher keys. And so hopefully you learned something. Hopefully it was useful. And if it was, be sure to like and subscribe for more content like it, including my other title room videos, which are probably a little bit less tech intensive than this dungeon, but a lot of them are out already, and the rest are going to be coming out in the next couple of days. Plus, we'll be making a ton more guide content through season 2 and beyond the entire World Souls saga. As always, I need to give a massive thank you to all of my subscribers over on Patreon for their continued support, and I'll see everyone in the next video.